The studio buzzed with a nervous energy, like a storm brewing just out of sight. The audience, packed into rows of plush red seats, whispered to each other, their eyes darting between the brightly lit stage and the two women who stood like warriors, ready for battle. Ellen DeGeneres, with her signature grin, leaned back in her host chair, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Across from her, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat rigid, her jaw tight, her hands clasped so firmly her knuckles paled. The air felt thick, charged with unspoken grudges, as if one wrong word could spark an explosion. Ellen's voice cut through the tension, sharp and mocking. She tilted her head, eyeing Jasmine with a glint of disdain. "So, Congresswoman, you're here to talk about your big charity gala, but let's be real, it's just a photo op for you politicians, right? All flash, no substance." The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, but she didn't flinch. She'd been warned Ellen might play dirty, but this was a low blow, questioning her integrity on live television. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice steady but laced with steel. "Ellen, I'm here to talk about raising millions for homeless veterans, not to be insulted by someone who thinks charity's just a punchline." The crowd murmured, some clapping, others shifting uncomfortably. Ellen's grin faltered, but she doubled down, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, please, spare us the noble act. You're just chasing headlines, darling." The word darling landed like a slap, and Jasmine's face hardened. She wasn't here to be patronized. The audience felt the shift, their whispers growing louder, like a hive stirred to life. They'd come for a friendly chat, maybe some laughs, but this was something else entirely. Ellen, sensing the room's unease, waved a hand dismissively. "Look, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Politicians like you love the spotlight, but where's the real work?" Her words were a challenge, a dare for Jasmine to lose her cool. The camera zoomed in, catching the fire in Jasmine's eyes, as she gripped the armrests of her chair. Jasmine's heart pounded, but she kept her voice low, deliberate. "You want to talk about work, Ellen? I've spent years fighting for people you'd never invite on this stage. People you wouldn't even look at. Don't lecture me about substance when you're sitting there throwing cheap shots." The audience erupted, some cheering, others booing. The noise a chaotic mix of support and shock. Ellen's face flushed, her composure cracking as she realized Jasmine wasn't backing down. The stage lights seemed to burn hotter, spotlighting the growing rift. Ellen leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, barely audible, to the crowd but caught by the microphones. "You think you're untouchable because you're some hotshot politician? I've been in this game longer than you, and I know a fake when I see one." Jasmine's breath caught, the insult cutting deep. She'd faced critics before, but this was personal, a public attack meant to humiliate her. The room pulsed with anticipation, every eye locked on the two women. Jasmine's mind raced, weighing her next move. She could walk off, let Ellen have her moment, but that would mean surrender. Instead, she straightened, her gaze piercing. "Ellen, you're not exposing me. You're exposing yourself. Keep talking, and I'll show this audience exactly who you are." The threat hung in the air, a promise of more to come, as the director signaled a commercial break, leaving the audience hanging on the edge of their seats. The cameras cut, but the tension didn't. Stagehands froze, unsure whether to approach the two women glaring at each other across the set. Ellen's smirk returned, but it was shaky, like she knew she'd started a fire she might not control. Jasmine, meanwhile, sat back, her mind already planning her next words. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jasmine's pulse thundered in her ears as the studio lights dimmed for the commercial break, but the fire in her chest only burned hotter. She sat still, her eyes locked on Ellen, who was now whispering furiously to a producer, her hands gesturing wildly. The audience, still reeling from the verbal sparring, buzzed with speculation, their voices a low hum that filled the cavernous set. Some craned their necks trying to catch a glimpse of the two women, while others scribbled notes, sensing this moment would be headline news by morning. Ellen straightened in her chair, brushing off the producer with a sharp wave. She turned to Jasmine, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. "You think you can come on my show and threaten me? This is my house, Congresswoman. You're out of your league." The words were meant to intimidate, to reassert control, but Jasmine didn't blink. She'd dealt with bigger bullies than Ellen, and she wasn't about to let this one win. The audience hushed, sensing the confrontation wasn't over. A woman, in the front row, clutched her purse, her eyes wide with unease, while a man nearby leaned forward, eager for more. Jasmine unclasped her hands, letting them rest calmly on her lap, a stark contrast to the storm in her expression. "Your house, Ellen? Then why are you so scared of a guest asking for respect? You started this. Don't cry now." Her tone was icy, each word deliberate, slicing through Ellen's bravado. Ellen's laugh was brittle, echoing in the quiet studio. She leaned back, crossing her arms, but her foot tapped nervously under the desk. "Scared? Of you? Please. I've had bigger names than you on this couch, and they all played nice. You're the one making a fool of yourself." The jab was meant to sting, to paint Jasmine as an amateur, but it only fueled her resolve. She'd come to talk about her charity, not to be dragged through the mud, and she wasn't leaving until Ellen paid for her words. A stagehand signaled the end of the break, and the cameras whirred back to life. The audience settled, their anticipation palpable, like a crowd waiting for a boxing match to resume. Ellen plastered on her TV smile, but it was strained, her eyes darting to Jasmine with barely concealed hostility. "Welcome back, folks," she said, her voice overly bright. "We're here with Representative Jasmine Crockett, who's got a lot to say, apparently." The crowd tittered, unsure whether to laugh or brace for more. Jasmine seized the moment, her voice clear and commanding. "Let's talk about why I'm really here, Ellen, since you seem so interested in my motives. My gala raised $4 million for veterans' housing. That's not a photo op. That's real people getting real help." The audience clapped, their support swelling, but Ellen cut in, her tone sharp. "And I'm sure you took a nice cut for yourself, right? Politicians always do." The accusation was reckless, a desperate swing, and the crowd gasped, stunned by the audacity. The air crackled with hostility, every word a spark threatening to ignite. Jasmine's smile was tight, but her eyes blazed. "You want to throw dirt, Ellen? Fine. Let's talk about your charity work. Oh wait, you don't have any. Unless you count selling mugs with your face on them." The audience roared, some cheering, others shouting in protest, the noise a chaotic wave crashing over the set. Ellen's face reddened, her hands gripping the desk as she struggled to keep her cool. The producer signaled frantically from the sidelines, but neither woman cared. Jasmine pressed on, her voice rising with conviction. "You invited me here to tear me down, but I'm not your punching bag. You want to talk about fakes? Look in the mirror." The words landed like a thunderclap, and Ellen's smirk vanished. For a moment she was speechless, her usual quick wit failing her. The audience held its breath, waiting for her response, as the tension coiled tighter, ready to snap. Ellen's silence stretched, a rare crack in her polished facade, and the studio seemed to hold its breath with her. The audience, caught in the grip of the escalating clash, leaned forward, their faces a mix of shock and fascination. Jasmine sat tall, her gaze unflinching, her words still ringing in the air. She'd struck a nerve, and she knew it. The set, with its cheerful blue backdrop and cozy furniture, felt like a battlefield now, the bright lights exposing every flicker of emotion on the two women's faces. The host's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her note cards, but she forced a laugh, harsh and unsteady. "You've got some nerve, Congresswoman, coming here and trying to turn this on me. This is my show, and I ask the questions." Her voice was loud, almost shrill, a desperate attempt to reclaim control. But the audience wasn't buying it. Their murmurs grew sharper, some shaking their heads, others whispering about Ellen's cheap shots. The room was slipping from her grasp. Jasmine's lips curved, not in a smile but in a challenge. She tilted her head, her voice calm but cutting. "You're right, Ellen, it's your show. So why are you wasting it attacking me instead of talking? About something that matters? Or is this all you've got left, picking fights to stay relevant?" The words were a dagger, and the crowd erupted, clapping and shouting, their energy feeding Jasmine's resolve. A man in the back row stood, pumping his fist, while a woman nearby covered her mouth, stunned by the boldness. Ellen's eyes flashed with fury, her composure unraveling. She leaned across the desk, her voice low and venomous. "You think you're some hero because you've got a title and a cause? I've built an empire entertaining people, while you're just another politician making promises you won't keep." The accusation was personal, meant to wound, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She'd heard worse in congressional hearings, faced uglier insults in campaign trails. This was nothing she couldn't handle. The cameras caught every detail, zooming in on Ellen's clenched jaw and Jasmine's steely calm. The director, sweating in the control booth, hesitated to cut to another break, knowing the audience at home was glued to their screens. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice steady but fierce. "You want to talk about empires, Ellen? Yours is built on making people laugh, but right now, you're making them cringe. You invited me here, insulted my work, and now you're mad because I'm not bowing to you." The audience roared again, their cheers drowning out Ellen's attempt to interrupt. A producer signaled frantically, but Ellen ignored it, her face a mask of rage. "You're nobody without that microphone, Jasmine. Nobody. You think you can walk in here and lecture me? I've been doing this since you were in school." The jab was desperate, a last-ditch effort to diminish her guest, but it backfired. The audience booed, their disapproval a wave crashing over the set. Jasmine's eyes glinted, sensing her moment was near. The energy in the room was electric, every word fueling the fire. Jasmine clasped her hands, her voice rising with purpose. "You're wrong, Ellen. I don't need your microphone to be somebody. I've got my work, my people, and my truth. You need this show to feel important, and you're terrified of anyone who doesn't play your game." The crowd exploded, their cheers shaking the studio, as Ellen's face paled, her hands dropping to her lap. For the first time she looked small, exposed, her empire crumbling under Jasmine's words. The confrontation teetered on the edge, the outcome still uncertain. Jasmine felt the weight of the moment, knowing she'd pushed Ellen to the brink. The host's next move would decide how this ended, but Jasmine was ready, her resolve unbreakable. The audience, now fully on her side, waited, their anticipation a living thing, as the stage lights burned brighter, illuminating the final act of this fiery showdown. The audience's cheers reverberated through the studio, a tidal wave of support that left Ellen visibly shaken. Her hands lay limp on the desk, her usual quick wit buried under the weight of Jasmine's relentless truth. The set, once a beacon of light-hearted banter, now felt like a courtroom, with Jasmine as the unflinching prosecutor and Ellen, the defendant, scrambling for a defense. The cameras, unyielding in their focus, captured every falter, every bead of sweat on Ellen's brow as the crowd waited for her to strike back. Ellen's voice, when it came, was strained, barely masking her desperation. "You think you've won them over, don't you? This audience loves a show, but they'll forget. You by tomorrow. You're just a flash in the pan, Jasmine." The words were meant to wound, to diminish, but they sounded hollow, like a boxer throwing punches with no strength left. The audience hissed, their loyalty firmly with the congresswoman who'd stood her ground against their once-beloved host. Jasmine's heart raced, but her face remained a mask of calm resolve. She leaned back, her voice steady and piercing. "Forget me? Maybe. But they won't forget this, Ellen. They won't forget how you tried to tear me down and ended up exposing your own bitterness." The crowd roared, their applause a thunderclap that shook the stage. A woman in the third row wiped tears from her eyes, moved by Jasmine's defiance, while a man nearby shouted, "Tell her!" The energy was a living thing, lifting Jasmine higher. Ellen's shoulders slumped, her eyes darting to the producer, who stood frozen, unable to salvage the moment. She opened her mouth, then closed it, the fight draining from her. "You're out of line," she muttered. But the words lacked conviction, swallowed by the audience's fervor. Jasmine seized the opening, her voice rising with unshakable confidence. "No, Ellen, you're out of line. You invited me here to talk about helping people, but all you've done is sling insults. That's not power, that's weakness." The studio pulsed with raw emotion, every clap and shout a testament to Jasmine's triumph. She turned slightly, addressing the audience directly, her tone warm but fierce. "This isn't about me. It's about the veterans I'm fighting for, the people who need us to show up, not tear each other down. That's what I came to do, and no one's stopping me, not even you, Ellen." The crowd leapt to their feet, their ovation deafening, a wave of admiration that crashed over the set and left Ellen speechless. The host's face was a mask of defeat, her empire of charm reduced to rubble in minutes. She tried to muster a smile, but it was frail, crumbling under the weight of her miscalculation. Jasmine, meanwhile, sat tall, her eyes bright with victory, not arrogance. She'd come to defend her work, her honor, and she'd done it with a fire that left no room for doubt. The director, sensing the moment's peak, signaled to wrap, but the audience's cheers drowned out the cue, their voices a chorus of justice, as the cameras panned out. Jasmine rose from her chair, her movements deliberate, regal. She didn't glance at Ellen, who remained seated, staring at the desk, as if it could shield her from the fallout. The audience kept clapping, some reaching out as Jasmine walked off the stage, their hands brushing the air in awe. She'd silenced her critic, not with volume, but with truth, and the weight of that victory settled over her like a crown. The studio lights dimmed, but the energy lingered, a story already spreading beyond the walls. Jasmine's steps echoed in the hallway as she left, her head high, her mission clear. She'd faced a giant and won, not just for herself, but for everyone who'd ever been dismissed or demeaned. The audience, still buzzing as they filed out, knew they'd witnessed something unforgettable, a moment of raw, righteous triumph that would echo long after the cameras stopped rolling.